I'm not racist and I don't feel hate. I feel true compassion and empathy. But the purpose of running a government is to take care of the people who are citizens of that country. There's no other purpose. It's not to save the world or change the global climate or whatever. And it's certainly not to spend a huge percentage of your budget on refugee resettlement. It's to take care of the people who are born there. That's your job in the same way a father's job is to take care of his children, not the neighbor's kids. And there's something almost beyond dereliction of duty in not doing that. In other words, I have 4 children, for example, and if a couple of them were in real trouble, as people in all of our countries are, the native-born population in actual trouble, you know, one of my kids has leukemia, for example, or another one has a drug problem, and I say, you know, that's tough, I'm really sorry, but the neighbor's kids literally have never been to Disney World, ever. And that's just wrong. And so I'm going to take my retirement account and cash it out and take the neighbor's kids to Disney World, because everyone should have a chance to go to Disney World. See ya, and I leave. What's the message I'm sending to my own children? I hate you. I'm ignoring your problems because I'm focused on the problems of people who aren't in our family. It's kind of that simple. A leader's sacred responsibility is to take care of his own people, period.
This Tucker Carlson speech in Australia is so good that we're back for more in this one. And unlike what I showed in my last video where Tucker Carlson completely destroyed 2 woke reporters, I'll put that link in the description of this video for you to watch when you're done, which I do recommend if you're in for a good laugh. But in this one, he crushes multiple governments around the world, and I will say that this one starts off a little slow, but he does ramp up in true Tucker fashion. And you know what? I'll just let Tucker take it from here.
Thank you very much for having me. I've loved your country from afar my entire life. I've idolized Australia. Actually, I haven't been here until a week ago, but I had this view of Australia in my mind, of handsome, brave men fighting off dangerous animals, of beautiful women standing windblown in the surf, and it's all true. So I really have loved it. We've been, I think, to 5 cities, and I've just been completely and utterly impressed. And really sort of the only downside is I've given speeches in a lot of them, and I felt guilty during every one, because rule 1 of being in someone else's country is don't talk to them about their politics. There's something awful about that, overbearing. I lived in Washington, our capital city. It's actually not so different from Canberra, weirdly. I guess all capital cities are the same. But we would get this sort of continuous retinue of foreigners showing up to lecture us, Bono showing up, and I'd always think, go back to Dublin. More, you know, like, what do you know? You're not even an American. So with that caveat, my apologies for having anything to say about your politics, which I don't really understand, except in the sort of grossest terms. And I think the perception, perhaps here I can't speak for you, but around the world is there's this, you know, the mothership, Great Britain, that gave birth to all these other successful countries, including the one that I live in, and that it somehow has like moral authority as a result of that. Well, if you haven't been to London recently, book a ticket and then fly back here. In fact, why don't you just fly from London to Perth, assuming there are direct flights, and ask yourself, what do I notice? One city is crumbling, it's filthy. It's been so misruled by the people in charge that unless you're rich, you can't live there. And you come back to, and that's not an exaggeration, go to London, seriously. And you come back to Perth, and and I know everyone makes fun of Perth in Western Australia, but as an outsider, I mean, it's like San Francisco without the junkies. It's one of the prettiest places I've ever seen in my life. And I thought, I don't even know who rules this. I don't understand the details of the politics. I'm a foreigner. But whoever is managing this place day to day is doing a remarkable job. There are very few cities in the world as pretty as your cities. And I know that you're so isolated and just far away in the southern hemisphere. And you might not have perspective on that, but some of the capitals that you read about and in some cases genuflect toward, consider superior, take orders from, have no right to give you orders because they're in no sense superior to you. In fact, they're inferior to you by a lot. And London is at the top of that list. So I guess my bottom line advice, and I mean this in a spirit of generosity and humility, but is, understand how impressive Australia is in comparison to the rest of the world, particularly the English-speaking world. Australia has advantages that the rest of us, the other 4 of the 5 eyes, can only dream about. You're sparsely populated, 26 million well-educated, decent people, law-abiding people. You have virtually no real poverty, no concentrations of poverty in this country. It's like the most middle-class English-speaking country left in the world, which is a huge compliment. That's what you want. It's basically egalitarian country. Egalitarian countries are stable countries. You know, Bolivia is not stable because it's, you know, pyramid shaped. This is pretty flat. It's the last flat country economically in the English speaking world. And its natural resources, you know, dwarf everyone else's. I mean, I do think one of the great lies that we in the modern world have been told is that prosperity is generated by banks and real estate. And that's it. Then money lending is the engine of prosperity. And in the short term, that of course can be true because it juices that, you know, that mysterious thing we call GDP, which is a measure of economic activity. But over time, it doesn't actually create wealth. That's a lie. What creates wealth is productivity, and what's required for productivity are resources. And you have more resources than virtually anybody. Bauxite, coal, ore, gas, nickel, copper, lead, uranium, more than almost anybody else.
They also have quite a bit of gold.
In a country with almost no problems, except the ones that you allow your leaders to intentionally import. And pretty much nobody lives here. I just flew over, you know, most of your country this morning. There was nobody there. Sheep, dingoes, desert, and I know, you know, a lot of it's inhospitable, but I mean, just people from crowded countries, which is most countries in the world, look at this and they, in envy. This should be one of the most powerful countries in the world. In fact, by its nature, it is, because it has more than almost anybody else. And so to take orders from some disgusting, filthy, fog-soaked rock in the North Sea, holding one of your citizens hostage.
He's talking about Julian Assange there.
Because they sent your ancestors here as a penalty. I mean, at a certain point, I think you need to say to them, I'm sorry, it's 2024. We're in charge. You're taking orders from us. And if it, you know, I mean it, actually. And I shouldn't say this because I know that there are members of parliament present, but maybe you should take your refugee budget and buy a nuclear weapon or two so people take you seriously. I'm not joking. If you don't screw this country up on purpose through mass immigration, which is what the other 4 countries have done, that's the reason they're in decline. No one wants to say it, it's true. If you don't do that, Australia will lead the world because you have every advantage. And people are happy here. And so my strong advice to you is don't go the way of your cousins in our countries. I mean, Canada, of all countries in the world, I would say Canada is the closest in its sort of essential facts to Australia. It's huge. It's actually bigger than Australia. Second biggest land mass in the world. Amazing natural resources. An incredibly nice, polite population, well-educated, with a history of valiant war service. You know, sort of everything you would want. A little boring. That's good. Exciting countries are wildly overrated. Las Vegas is exciting. You wouldn't live there, right? There's something to be said about a country whose, you know, main forms of excitement are Molson and sled dogs. That's not bad. And that country basically killed itself through bad leadership. They completely changed the population of the country in 10 years, completely, and made it poor. And now people can't buy houses there. The economy's in free fall. People who are born in Canada cannot buy a house, period, because there are just too many people. And I'm sure some of them are great people. And by the way, just to be completely clear, I'm utterly sympathetic to people who want to move to my country, for example. We let in 30 million people illegally in the last 4 years. That's a crime, but I'm not mad at them. I'm actually flattered by it. They want to move to my country. Of course they do, because it's the best country. That's how I feel.
That's how I feel as well. And if you agree, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button?
It's like someone saying your wife is hot. Yeah, I think so too. You can't have her, but I'm glad you appreciate it. I mean, honestly, that's how I feel. I don't begrudge any immigrant from any country wanting to move to the United States because I love the United States above all. I am American. So it's not a question of being mad at immigrants. I'm completely sympathetic. In fact, I'm empathetic. I can't wait to get back to my country. But that doesn't mean that the movement of millions of people, mostly with low skills and no, native command of the language and no shared culture of the people who already live there, doesn't mean it's good for the country itself. It's not good, actually. It's bad. It's the most destructive thing you can do to a country. That's not racism. That's not hate. I'm not racist and I don't feel hate. I feel true compassion and empathy. But the purpose of running a government is to take care of the people who are citizens of that country. There's no other purpose. It's not to save the world or change the global climate or whatever. And it's certainly not to spend a huge percentage of your budget on refugee resettlement. It's to take care of the people who are born there. That's your job in the same way a father's job is to take care of his children, not the neighbor's kids. And there's something almost beyond dereliction of duty in not doing that. In other words, I have 4 children, for example, and if a couple of them were in real trouble, as people in all of our countries are, the native-born population in actual trouble, you know, one of my kids has leukemia, for example, or another one has a drug problem, and I say, you know, that's tough, I'm really sorry, but the neighbor's kids literally have never been to Disney World, ever. And that's just wrong. And so I'm going to take my retirement account and cash it out and take the neighbor's kids to Disney World, because everyone should have a chance to go to Disney World. See ya, and I leave. What's the message I'm sending to my own children? I hate you. I'm ignoring your problems because I'm focused on the problems of people who aren't in our family. It's kind of that simple. A leader's sacred responsibility is to take care of his own people, period. Period. There is no other responsibility. That's why he's elected. That's why he's in charge. That's why you're dad. Doesn't mean you don't like the neighbor's kids or think they should go to Disney World. Everyone should go to Disney World. But the priority has to be, if you're dad, your kids, because you're their father. So if you're the prime minister of a country and you find yourself spending all of your time worrying about the populations of other countries, you are not a legitimate leader. Period. By definition. We have someone in our country who sort of said that out loud. I thought it was, whatever, leaving aside any other quality, being orange or whatever qualities you think Trump has or doesn't have, that was his core pitch in 2016, and there was sort of no arguing against it. Like, how is that wrong? How is a leader's job not to prioritize his own people? Of course it is. No one can make a rational argument against that, so they don't. They attack anybody who raises questions about it. And in the rest of those other countries, including mine, they're starting to criminalize complaining about it. In other words, this is a great thing, and if you say otherwise, we'll put you in jail. And they're planning to do that here, in case you don't know. They've absolutely done that in Canada. In the UK, they put a lot of people in prison for complaining about it. Hey, I don't think you're taking care of the people who are born here. Shut up, racist, you're going to jail. Actually, every week people go to jail for that. Imagine that. Imagine that. And imagine the mindset that allows that. If you are telling people, human beings, adult citizens, that they don't have a right to express what they believe, what are you saying? Well, what you're saying is, I don't think you're human. Because the right to say what you think pre-exists government. It's something that you're born with as a human being. It's what distinguishes you from animals and slaves. That's the core of your human autonomy, the right to say what you really believe, to express your conscience. And if you no longer possess that, you are not human anymore. You belong to someone else. You are an object. And so any leader who tells you, you don't have a right to say that, you don't have a right to criticize me or my policies, that person considers you subhuman. And that's a crime as far as I'm concerned. We shouldn't even have that. And by the way, in my country, we have an explicit law against that. It's the First Amendment to our Constitution, because ours is a revolutionary country. And so the framers of our founding documents were forced, under gunfire actually, to think this through. We're building a country from nothing. What do we want? But the founders of the other 4 countries, big countries in the Anglosphere, New Zealand, Great Britain, and Canada, I honestly think they never imagined a world where leaders would strip from people their most fundamental right, the right to express their conscience. I don't think they imagined that possible. They were Christians. And a sort of key tenet of Christianity is God created people. We didn't. Therefore, we're not capable of owning them. That's the abolitionist movement was based on that idea. Christians in the West ended slavery around the world. They haven't gotten a ton of credit for it in recent years, but they did. Of course, it still exists in parts of the world, but it does not exist in the West thanks to leaders who they may not have been devout Christians, and it wasn't a sectarian question. It was a more fundamental understanding of the world. You didn't create people. You didn't endow them with their rights. God did that. Therefore, you can't take them away. And if you try, then you are not treating them as human beings, but as something less than that. And I honestly think that people who wrote your founding documents just assumed that and didn't think it would ever be challenged. Well, now it is being challenged. And my strong advice to you, and I said I wasn't going to weigh in on Australian politics, but my strong advice to you, or any human being who wants to preserve the most sacred of his human rights, would be to resist that up to and including being willing to go to jail for saying what you believe. Because if they can strip from you your right to say what you think, there's literally nothing they can't do to you. There's nothing they can't do to you.
I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there. But he just makes you think when you look back at the COVID era and how people try to take away Americans' rights. You see how the two-tier justice system has been working as they prosecute Trump and Alex Jones, and they're throwing Steve Bannon in prison, yet Merrick Garland is getting away with the same thing that they're throwing Steve Bannon in jail for. Joe Biden was excused by Robert Hur, basically said that he's too frail of an old man to stand trial, so they give him a pass. Merrick Garland, who, like I said, is in contempt of Congress, just like Steve Bannon, who, like I mentioned, is going to prison in a couple days. Merrick Garland is not being prosecuted or pursued by the DOJ, even though he is also in contempt of Congress, which Anna Paulina Luna has threatened to actually have him locked up tomorrow morning, by the Sergeant at Arms, because the DOJ won't act appropriately, and because Merrick Garland won't hand over the audio transcript of Robert Hur's interview of Joe Biden when he was investigating if Joe Biden should be prosecuted for his classified documents that he kept in his garage, even though it's not even apples to apples when you compare it to Trump, because Trump was president when he kept his files. Joe Biden kept his files beginning when he was a senator. He kept them in his garage, and who knows how many people went in and out of that house. We know Hunter lived there for a while, and we're all aware of Hunter's issues by now. So Tucker's right in that the way that the founders of our country wrote the rules, but he's kind of wrong because they're not being applied fairly in, like I mentioned, this two-tier justice system, which makes this 2024 election the most important of our lifetimes, the most important one yet. And I know they say that about every election, but things constantly ramp up, and that's probably true. The next one will be more important than this current one. So I encourage everybody out there, if you're not registered, go register to vote. Make sure that you vote for Donald Trump 2024, and also vote for Republicans down ticket, because we can't have him handcuffed by Congress or the House like he was in the second half of his first term. We need him to be able to actually get things done for us Americans, because, to Tucker's point, Donald Trump is in it for the American people. He does demonstrate the type of leadership abilities and the type of leadership that Tucker Carlson just explained there. I mean, that's what America First is all about. And so I'm just going to wrap it up there. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This wasn't as funny as the last one, so if you're in for a laugh, click the video in the description. Also, hit that like and subscribe button, and share this video with anyone that you think might need to see it. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you guys in the next video.